Good evening. My name is Cecily Wilson Turner. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Elementary Education for the City School District of Albany. And tonight we have our first forum for our parents, guardian, and community to look specifically at our plans to date around reopening school at the elementary level. I am joined with a panel of staff from the City School District of Albany. I'm going to begin introductions with our superintendent, Mrs. Kawita G. Adams.
So good evening and welcome to our elementary reopening community parent and guardian forum. We're so very excited to have this opportunity to listen and hear what some of the questions are as we look at what are the things that we need to do to address reopening in the safest manner possible for our students and our faculty and staff, as well as what works for our families and what are some of the concerns that we have coming from our families and our community members. And so I want to take the time to thank Dr. Wilson Turner, who has led the work at the elementary level. Our committee, outstanding work with looking at what some of the possibilities are and the input of our students as well. And so at this time, I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Wilson Turner and say thank you so very much for this opportunity. And I'm so very happy that we have the input from the community and the families at this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Adams. Also joining us this evening are members of our committee that have been working tirelessly to come up with a draft recommendation for Superintendent Adams on reopening elementary schools. I would like to introduce Ms. Marie Cullihan, principal of the Albany School of Humanities, Melissa Hunt, kindergarten teacher at Sheridan Preparatory Academy and elementary vice president for the Teachers Union, and Michelle Bridgewater, district improvement director and president of the Administrators Association. What we will do this evening is I will go through a PowerPoint providing information on where our recommendations are to date around reopening elementary schools. You will note throughout the presentation, no final decisions have been made as we continue to seek input from our stakeholders. At the conclusion of this presentation, we will answer 9 highly frequently asked questions that were collected in our survey, and then we will hopefully have time for additional questions that are coming in live from our public. So I will begin with our opening vision, mission, and goals. All the work that we have done continues to be in alignment with our vision to be a district of excellence and to work in partnership with our community. We are continuing to focus on our goals of increased student achievement, delivering quality instruction, using our leadership to the full capacity during these challenging times, and empowering our families and working very closely with our diverse community to create the best possible outcomes. So as I mentioned, this is an opportunity to provide an update and feedback on, and to receive feedback on our planning process and our status for reopening schools. And so if you have questions or feedback that you would like to add, the chat is open and you can type your questions directly in there. Any questions that are duplicative will be addressed as one question, and any questions that we're unable to answer at the end of the time will be included in a frequently asked question document that will be revisited by the district throughout our entire process and discussed at our upcoming board meetings and in our board documents. So this is a slide that I want to read explicitly so that you understand the charge that was presented to this group and the work that they've had to undertake. And then I'm going to go into detail as to who our participants are. Superintendent Adams charged the Elementary Reopening Committee with developing recommendations for reimagining elementary schools in this time of the COVID-19 pandemic. She asked the committee to define the framework for learning in 3 modalities: fully on-site, blended, and fully virtual or off-site. The team's best thinking to date, given the parameters, is presented within. The team continues to research, review guidance documents from the Reimagine Education Advisory Council and the New York State's Departments of Health and Education, and seek input from stakeholders to inform this recommendation. Our ultimate goal and purpose is to present our best recommendation for a safe plan for reopening that creates the most conducive learning environment within the guidance parameters. With that said, I've had an outstanding team of over 20 district and building staff members who have met with me sometimes twice a week and all throughout the last 6 weeks on their own time and are committed to show up each and every time to participate and provide their best thinking to ensure that the priorities of the groups that they represent are included in our conversation and thought through at all angles. And we all know, as we sit at the table virtually each time, that we're making very difficult decisions and attempting to make the best decisions at that time. And I want to publicly thank each and every one of them for their dedication and commitment and their thinking and their willingness to really roll up their sleeves and work hard in this work. So there are some required components of our reopening plan that you'll see throughout my actual presentation, but I'm going to give you a high overview here. There will be parent choice as to whether your child attends in person, hybrid, or virtual. We're preparing options for each, specifically at elementary, in person and virtual. We will continue to work on enhanced academic rigor and accountability. All students and employees will be wearing masks. Families are asked to provide masks for their children, and the dish will have replacement masks and also face shield options for employees. Daily health screenings will be in place for all employees and students. Parents are asked to partner with us and ensure that their child's temperature is taken daily before coming to school, in addition to monitoring their child for symptoms. We will work within the local health department guidelines to support contact tracing. There will be intensive daily cleaning and disinfecting protocols. We are minimizing the use of shared books and supplies, and when they do have to be shared, there will be an explicit process as to how they are sanitized and the pause in between use. Our school visitors will be restricted to those who are required for school business, and we will spend a great deal of time training and retraining students and staff on proper hand hygiene practices. So our committee began with the intent of planning for our pre-K through 5th grade students to attend school each and every day. As a result, we took a look at our spacing and how we could fit students in and how we could group them safely in cohorts. We resulted in a plan that would have our 6th grade students at Ash, Eagle Point, Giffen, and Toast follow a middle school schedule for the coming school year. Our remaining pre-K through 5 students would be split into groups of 12 or in larger groups if it allows, if they are able to be spaced 6 feet apart. In some instances, will be allowed to house full classes as a result of that. Our staff is being assigned to best support the needs of all of our students. However, it was a priority of this committee that every child has the opportunity to learn and see their classroom teacher each day that we are in session. Our goal is to provide our core teaching staff a half day of planning time, either weekly or bi-weekly, in order to support the professional development and planning that will need to occur in order to support the different model of teaching that we are trying to provide. We are currently working on developing staggered arrival and dismissal specific to each school that will allow the most time for symptom screening, children to pick up their grab-and-go breakfast as needed, and to incorporate daily teaching planning time. Again, our students and employees will wear masks and maintain the 6 feet of social distancing. Again, we will have individual sets of classroom and personal materials wherever possible and limit shared materials. Student movement will be limited in order to reduce the amount of possible spread if in any instance, so we are reducing adult contact as well. Students are primarily located in one space as a result for the duration of the day. We will use outdoors as much as we possibly can and our hallways to create opportunities for students to have regular movement breaks, to have their recess, and even where necessary to support physical education. So when we look very closely at spacing, currently, we think that we may be able to keep Ash, Arbor Hill, Giffen, Eagle Point, Montessori, Pine Hills, and Toast, their pre-K through 5th grade students in their building. However, we think that we will need to place Delaware dual language and pre-K at New Scotland, may possibly need to relocate to Myers in order to accommodate the space needed. And Schuyler and Sheridan Preparatory Academy may need to send their 4th and 5th grade students to the Clement building. We also will need to send some of our self-contained special education students along with their grade level peers, and some of our 6th grade students from Ash, Eagle Point, Giffen, and Toast may attend Hackett, North Albany, or Neal as they follow the middle school model. Again, our goal is for student class sizes of 12, and to staff that, we would need more staff. And so we've looked at combining our core teachers with our other teachers, our encore, PE, music, and art and library, reading teachers, ENL teachers first, and then seeing if we need to utilize hall monitors to support any supervision needs, and our teaching assistants as well. We are also, if necessary, will tap into our instructional coaches, social workers, school psychologists, speech therapists, and behavior specialists, as well as any staff at the secondary level that may be available for reassignment. Again, our priority is to pair our teachers with the first list of staff, as those are people who readily provide direct instruction to students on a regular basis. Our structure for the day that we recommend is, again, to have that daily contact with the teacher. The child would spend half the day with the teacher, who would provide instruction to the group, and then a supervising adult would provide supervision for the other half of the day. If that person happened to be a reading teacher or an ENL teacher, they would also be able to provide their instruction live to those students who need those support services. We thought it was important that supervision be fluid, and so that the classroom teacher could move between their two spaces to provide a mixture of direct instruction and then independent practice and direct instruction to create a balance that's best for students. We also thought that it would be helpful for our encore teachers to rotate through and be able to provide live instruction to each class, so that each child eventually gets to spend time with their encore teacher. Our reading, ENL, and speech teachers are likely to be assigned supervision rotations that allow them to provide the services required to their students to a different grade level each week. So in this model, we are really looking at a flipped classroom. And so even though all of our students are on site, there still is some blending of how instruction is occurring. When the children are with their teacher, the teacher is providing direct explicit instruction and feedback to advance their learning. And then when they're with their supervisory adult, we are planning for instruction that students can lead themselves independently at each level or with a certain degree of support. And that type of instruction looks like things that students do to get background knowledge that will help them do better in the lesson that will be presented live to their with their teacher, and things that students can do to support independent practice that will help them have the skills necessary to access the learning that they're doing with their teacher. Our virtual instruction is something that we're looking at as being present and constant and developed throughout the school year, so that we are using it both on-site and off-site, for a limited number of students who may not be able to return to school, and then also being seamless in our movement from our virtual, our on-site instruction, if ever there's a need to go back to all virtual instruction for our students. And how we're doing that is we're using the resources that we've used throughout this process for our students with the Google Classroom, Nearpod, Dreambox, Lexia, Wonders, Envisions, and Thoughts being our primary resources. And like I said, being active year round, and so students are familiar with what that work looks like. We would like to provide a schedule of live instruction for each grade level. We are looking at rigorous approach to taking attendance and making sure that students are able to actively participate. And we will have a standards-based approach to grading. We want to make sure that we have a way of measuring student progress, whatever situation that we may find us in, live or virtual. And our standards-based report card has positioned us well to be able to continue measuring students on their progression toward mastery of the standard. We will be able to do that through our virtual platforms because we will be able to collect student responses and provide student feedback on the responses that they provide in real time with the teacher. We are planning to have grab-and-go materials established for each classroom at each grade level in the event of a short notice closure, so that we have things that students are able to take off campus with them in that moment. And teachers and coaches are going to be looked at to support the structure for virtual instruction, because those would be the best people equipped to do that work. We haven't defined what that structure looks like, but we know that that would be our primary resource. Our next steps, because we have to continue to work through every angle of reopening school in this way, is to assess the transportation capacity within the new regulations where there is limited seating due to social distancing, and to make sure that our PPE guidelines are in place. Again, we're working on determining those multi-entry points into staggered arrival for students. We are working on finalizing our staff and student supervision pairings and scheduling, and I really want to highlight my building principals here. Many of them are a part of my team, and even though they're not, they have weekly homework assignments that they've been completing to keep the progress moving forward and trying to get to as close to a model recommendation as possible. And we'll continue to develop robust guidelines around what our flipped instruction looks like when our students are on site with their teacher and their supervisory adult, and what it looks like when it's exclusively virtual, so that that is clearly communicated to students, parents, and teachers as we move through this new learning. We will have an intense focus on professional development to make sure teachers are well prepared, not just with the academic components and the virtual components, but for the social emotional needs that they will have themselves and the social emotional needs that our students will have. We will develop a communication plan with our final plans for every level that will be available for students, families, and staff so that we have clear guidance on how students will be able to re-entry. So at this point, I'm going to open it up to my panel and we're going to provide some responses on some of the most frequently asked survey questions. So we had 646 survey participants. We had 3,632 comments, and then they were filtered into 9 different categories. And I want to thank the communications office for going through those over 3,000 comments and distilling them down to the most frequently asked questions that we will continue to build upon as we go through this process. So our first question will be around delivery of instruction. And so that question is starting with Michelle Bridgewater. And the first question is, will students be held more accountable for grades and participation than in the spring?
So yes, the model developed at the elementary level on standards-based grading. Teachers grade progress towards the mastery of the subject. We believe with Google Classroom, Nearpod, Wonders, and Vision, Lexia, and Dreambox, students will be able to submit work and demonstrate understanding for feedback to support student grading.
Thank you, Michelle. Our next question will be answered by Ms. Cullihan. What % of instruction will be online and what will be in person?
The elementary model is currently proposed as a full on-site model with virtual components for students who need to remain at home. If we had to go to a partially on-site model, we would bring half the students on-site for 2 days a week and be virtual 3 days a week.
Sorry, Melissa, I was muted. Melissa, you have the next question. How many students will receive instruction?
All right, I was like, I don't know what happened.
Why isn't she talking?
The question is, how many students will receive instruction at a given time? Right now, the elementary model is proposed as a fully on-site model, and as described in the PowerPoint, students will be in cohorts of 12, or they will remain together as a full classroom if their class size and assigned space allows for them to remain 6 feet apart. It is a priority that students have daily contact with their classroom teacher and routine contact with academic and social emotional service providers in the safest manner possible.
Thank you. For transportation, Marie, how will social distancing be maintained and enforced on buses, and how frequently will buses be cleaned and sanitized?
So following Department of Health guidance, the district is considering operating yellow buses for general education students at a maximum of 50% capacity. This would mean 1 student per seat on all large buses, with students from the same household allowed to sit 2 in a seat. The district would adhere to strict social distancing protocols on buses serving students with special needs and is considering a limited capacity of 4 students on a small bus and 1 student on a wheelchair bus. All students and employees on all first student buses would be required to wear a mask or other face covering unless there is an underlying medical condition. All buses will be cleaned and sanitized in alignment with CDC guidelines. Drivers will wipe down all high-touch areas after each run. And first student also will implement an additional deep cleaning protocol for all of the school buses.
Thank you, Marie. Next slide, Mr. Baker. Thank you. Our next question is for athletics. And Melissa is going to address that one for us.
There's someone mowing the lawn, so I hope it's not, I hope you can hear me. So what safety precautions will the district implement and enforce to prevent the spread of COVID among student athletes, coaches, and spectators during the fall season? At this point, the New York State Public High School Athletic Association announced July 16th that the start of the fall athletic season will be delayed at least until September 21st and possibly until the late winter, early spring of 2021 due to the ongoing concerns about COVID-19. The association is committed to continuing to monitor and follow all health and safety guidance from the state and will work collaboratively with state officials to ensure that modified and high school athletics are following all required protocols when they are actually allowed to resume. Our school district will align with those recommendations as we all work together to ensure a safe and responsible resumption of athletics at an appropriate time.
Thank you, Melissa. Our safety and security question will be for Marie. What will be done to enforce social distancing, hand washing, and other safety protocols during the school day, including arrival and departure? What consequences will individuals face if they intentionally refuse to comply?
Thank you. We will use multiple assigned entrances to reduce the number of students entering, exiting, and gathering in one space. Hall monitors and other staff will also be utilized to help support students in maintaining that appropriate distance, in addition to signage and markings to help indicate 6-foot spacing on the floors. Students will be required to wear masks. Masks will be made available to students who may arrive to school without one. Students will use hand sanitizer as they enter the building, and they will have scheduled time throughout the day for hand washing. Supervisors will be tasked with ensuring staff are maintaining safety precautions as it relates to the above. Staff will be trained and provided appropriate PPE so they may comply with these expectations. Any staff member who does not comply with these expectations will be subject to coaching. Individuals who do not have a medical exemption may be subject to disciplinary action after successive failures to adhere to these guidelines.
I'm going to respond to the next question about health screenings. So how will screenings be handled, process, frequency, etc. for all students, employees, and building visitors? Staff will be asked to complete a screener questionnaire on a daily basis prior to reporting to confirm if they are not experiencing any COVID-19 symptoms. Staff will be expected to wear a mask on property and complete a temperature check before entering our buildings. Temperature assessment will be completed by machine or designated staff person when staff arrive at a work location. Parents and guardians will be required to screen their children at home before leaving school each day for any signs and symptoms. If any symptoms are present, they will need to keep the child home and call the school nurse. District staff will take the temperature of students as they enter the building at the multiple building entries at the start of the school day. Students with temperatures over 100 will be brought to the nurse to determine if the child needs to be placed in the isolation space with supervision, and the parent and guardian will be called for transport home. Nurses will conduct daily follow-up with the student and family. In the event of a positive COVID-19 case, the district will notify and engage its medical director and the New York State Department of Health, and protocols will be followed. If a student presents with any COVID-19 symptoms during the school day, the child will be sent to the nurse's office for assessment and to determine if the child needs to be placed in the isolation space with supervision, and a parent guardian will be contacted for transport home. Visitors to the building will be limited and screened for symptoms and temperature prior to entry. I'm also going to take the next question around health and hygiene. So what procedures will be in place to ensure that the adequate supply of hand sanitizer, soap, paper towels, and PPE are available to all students and staff in the buildings? How will you assure that students can easily access sinks for hand washing during the school day? The district is continuing to purchase PPE supplies on a revolving basis and using guidance from the New York State Department of Health and Office of General Services to inform that purchasing. We are utilizing different purchase options to address concerns about delays of interruption in supply. Additionally, the district has continued to maintain a central supply of hand soap, cleaning and disinfecting supplies, paper towels, Kleenex, etc., which is dispersed to each of our buildings. We are also ensuring that the inventory levels are looking at 30 to 60-day supplies of these items, which will be essential to maintaining the overall building cleanliness. Each cohort of students will have scheduled times to wash their hands throughout the day, coordinated at the building level to ensure that classes do not overlap. Breakfast and lunch will be Melissa. Where will students eat their meals and how will you enforce social distancing while students eat and are not wearing a mask?
So breakfast will be provided at the grab and go stations at each entry point every morning, and then the kids will bring those grab and goes to the classroom. Lunch orders will be collected the day prior and delivered to the classrooms, and the children will be eating in the classrooms.
Okay. And our next question is technology, and Michelle is going to address that one. What is the district doing to provide a laptop to every student and internet access to every home that doesn't have it?
Ms. Bridgewater, I think you're muted.
I can't see her.
Sorry, my screen was frozen.
Mm-hmm.
Within 5 days of the closure of school buildings in March, the district mobilized an effort to identify households in need of technology and connectivity. Using data gathered from in-person outreach, the district provided more than 3,200 Chromebooks to student homes to meet the need. The district did not have the devices necessary to provide a device to every individual student, so a device per household model was used. On March 26th, we submitted a Smart School investment plan to acquire an additional 4,900 devices in order to provide a device for every student and instructional staff member. Additionally, we began an effort to acquire 600 mobile internet hotspots to address the connectivity issue. We deployed the hotspots to all households in need by the end of April. At this time, there has been no approval of the Smart Schools investment plan submission, and we are in the process of ordering devices to meet the remaining need. Funding will be a combination of district sources, though we are still optimistic that approval of the Smart Schools plan will provide reimbursement for that acquisition. There is a strong likelihood that we will be able to take delivery of new devices by the end of September and have them deployed to students shortly thereafter. Until we are able to meet the one-to-one model, we are prioritizing deployment of devices to students who will be participating in exclusive or majority remote instruction.
And our last question from the frequently asked questions, oops, sorry, my control was there, is how will the district handle if a student or teacher tests positive for COVID-19? And Marie is going to address that.
So the district is monitoring all cases so we can take appropriate steps to ensure that all staff, students, and families are safe. Employees that are experiencing flu-like symptoms, those that have a concern about possible COVID-19 exposure, or those that are pursuit of COVID-19 tests to rule out exposure, are required to report their concern to their supervisor immediately. Supervisors then will review cases with the district's medical director, the respective assistant superintendent for instruction, and the human resources administrator. The medical director will evaluate the concern, and they will share all positive cases with the Albany County Department of Health to determine the next steps. The district will follow a similar process when a student is experiencing flu-like symptoms. If they or their parent or guardian has a concern about possible COVID-19 exposure, or if their family is pursuing a COVID-19 test to rule out exposure. The district will partner with the district physician to evaluate each case and share all positive cases with the Albany County Department of Health to determine the next steps. In most cases, the student or employee will be isolated and sent home, especially if the concern arises at school, and asked to provide the district with regular health updates before they are scheduled to return. The district then will partner with the county health department and make any necessary notifications at that point.
Thank you, Ms. Callahan. And thank you each and every participant of our panel for providing responses to our most frequently asked questions. We are now going to shift to our live questions that have been asked, and I ask that you bear with me as I navigate that space to get to our questions. So the first question is, will all schools require masks during the duration of the day for all children and staff? Or will the Albany City School District be following the basic New York State Education Department requirements that masks are optional at the 6 feet distance? At this point in time, as presented in our presentation, our expectations that all students wear masks and all staff wear masks, except during designated mask breaks and even when they are social distancing 6 feet apart. The next question is, can you speak to how face shields will be an option for employees? These would not provide protection for those around the teacher wearing the face mask. Face shields are not a replacement for face masks. Per the guidance, face coverings are described as face shields and face masks, both cloth, paper, and other acceptable forms. We will be able to provide face coverings to our staff in alignment with the guidance provided by SED, Department of Health, and the Governor's Committee for Reimagining Schools. Will parent choice be expected for the entire school year? For example, if a parent chooses to have their child attend virtually, will that child be locked in to attend virtually for the entire school year? We will be sending out a formal survey that will provide information about how parent choice will work and what length of time parents will have to select if they choose to participate in virtual or on-site learning experience. How do you decide which 6th graders attend what school? And how are you addressing concerns of 6th graders interacting with middle school age kids? So our middle school presentation is a week from this evening, and Ms. McKenna, the Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Instruction, will go into detail around the selections for middle level. And so they also have been working simultaneously on scheduling and determining what placements each school will go into. But we made the decision to move the 6th grades with the middle school so that they would have a more consistent experience as all the other 6th grade students in the district. And so we currently have 6th grade students in the middle school setting, and so we would just be adding our elementary 6th grades into the middle school setting, which we plan to do as we open up our new middle school model, I believe in 2 years or 3 years, I believe it is. Since we have some time, I'm going to go and find another face shields. So there are a couple of questions about pre-kindergarten through 5th grade at New Scotland and the dual language programs at DCS going to Myers. Because of the space at those 2 buildings, one of the current configurations proposed to allow for us to socially distance and place students in classrooms 6 feet apart in the required configuration, the recommendation is that we move pre-K through 5th grade New Scotland to Myers so they can house the entire school there. The reasoning behind that has to do a lot with the level of staffing that is needed for the various programs that exist in North Albany, particularly around the special education population, and trying to make that remain as coherent as possible. And the dual language program resulted in the least amount of siblings having to be moved. If we moved 4th and 5th grade out of DCS, it would have more sibling impact and splitting of families. And I'll just reiterate it as is stated on each slide. One of the reasons we're doing the presentation this evening is to get input and feedback around what we currently have recommended. No final decisions have been made. And as we continue to identify what our numbers are of students who are returning, we will have to make the decisions where we can fit students in the best possible model. I'll keep going. What is the plan for the non-instructional half of the day for students? So I want to restate that it's not a non-instructional day. The entire time that we have students on site is going to be focused on instruction, and principals are working really hard right now to create those staff pairings so that we're pairing our core classroom teachers with other certified adults who can help support student-led learning. And the learning that the students will do when they are not with their classroom teacher will be supporting the work that they started with their classroom teacher and that they will return to each day with their classroom teacher. So that the other half of the child's day is still focused on instruction, and we're still focused on ELA, math, social studies, and science. We will still bring in our encores in some format as we continue to try to work out whether that will be done virtually or in person, so that students still have access to art, music, physical education, and library, because we recognize that students value those subjects just as much as our other subjects. We want to make sure that we're able to provide them with a well-rounded experience. New Scotland. So another question about music, art, and physical education. I want to speak a little bit more to that. We've tried on a couple of different models of how we get to those subject areas. And right now we're trying to rotate them through so that they see every student or every classroom in the school building within a designated period of time while respecting the frequency of contact that they have for safety reasons. So there is a concerted effort to incorporate those subject areas for students. As if you saw our student focus group a little while ago, they emphasize the importance that they need to see their art, music, library, and PE teachers, just like they see everyone else. They were awesome. And so we are working diligently to do that in a way that is sense-making and safe for all. If a reading, ENL, etc. teacher is supposed to serve as a supervising adult and provide supervision, how will he or she be able to supervise 12 students when he or she usually provides instruction to only a few at a time? Excellent question, and one that the committee grappled with ourselves and actually had a small group dedicated to problem solving this that included some ENL reading teacher representation. It's a difficult situation, but what we liken it to is a lot of time in elementary school is spent in small group instruction while students engage in other independent tasks that are appropriate for them, that support their background knowledge or support their practicing of skills. And so our best thinking at this time is if our ENL teacher is supervising 12 students, we want it to be the students that they would typically support so that they're able to provide that live instruction for a period of time, in addition to other general education students, and then to be able to provide that model using small group instruction while helping to support those students who are doing their independent work, much like we do during reading group time or math group time, where students work independently while the classroom teacher pulls a group to the table. So it's something that we've given a great deal of thought to how we execute that in the best way that supports our students and our staff who will be taking on this task with our small cohorts of students. How are virtual instruction and in-person instruction balanced? So we still have some work to do around information gathering to determine how many students will need virtual instruction, and then to be able to pair that number of students with a teacher who will be able to provide that virtual instruction. It is not our intent at this time to have teachers who are teaching live classrooms to also be providing a separate virtual instruction for their students. We did have some conversation around whether we would be able to live stream instruction for families and what challenges that would pose, and have landed at this point in time that we would prefer to have a dedicated virtual instruction model for our students who are virtual that is aligned with what the students are learning in person, but that would have a dedicated adult to do that work. We think it's in the best interest of our staff to try to structure it that way, and the best interest of our students to try to structure it in a way that they have a dedicated person who is focused on that. Okay, thank you. Encore. Great. So how can we ensure that instruction for pre-K through first grade will be developmentally appropriate? Will they be allowed to move throughout the room? Will there be toys, books, and manipulatives available? I am concerned my child will begin school by not enjoying it. I also want her to be safe. So really very similar to questions to what we've grappled with in the larger reentry team. I'm grateful to have Melissa Hasty as our Director of Early Childhood Education on our team, because she keeps us honest about the fact that we're bringing our littlest people back into this very different setting and how we honor their instruction in a very developmentally appropriate way while keeping them safe. And so she and I, and also our offsite community-based pre-Ks are working together to figure out the best, safest models to do that create authentic learning experiences, again, with as many individualized materials that we can, so that students still get that play-based experience that is essential to development, particularly at pre-K and K, and that we're respective of where they are developmentally. But we've also given a lot of thought to the social emotional needs of our students and the retraining that we're going to be doing for students when, even as adults, our first instinct is to come in and hug people that we haven't seen in a very long time or that we just love very much, which our pre-K, K, and ones typically love their teachers very much and their friends very much. So there'll be a lot of teaching into how to safely socially distance as much as possible, in addition to how to maintain and take care of and not handle unnecessarily your mask. So a lot of teaching into what it means to be in school now will be really important for all of our students, but not least of all, our pre-K through first grade students. With flipped classroom, can parents who can manage it have time with supervised non-teacher be done at home? This reduces the number of kids to some degree and help with staggering. We haven't considered students participating partially in the day. I think that's what that question is asking. But the way we are structuring the independent learning is, the time that they are not with the classroom teacher is so that students can lead that learning with the support of an adult. But it's something that we'd have to bring back to the team for consideration in terms of what options parents would have for having their child to attend school. Will the school be providing materials for students who attend virtually? Yes, our intent is to provide the curriculum model and the instruction for virtual instruction. Virtual instruction is not the same as homeschooling, where there is an expectation that the parent provides and designs the curriculum for that instruction. Students who are enrolled in our schools and who are participating in virtual instruction would be provided with the curriculum and the direct instruction. How can we as parents encourage the district and state to change the measures of student progress? For example, no standardized tests this year. That's a question I will turn over to Mrs. Adams for something that we consider in our frequently asked questions area. Because I can honestly say I don't have a specific answer for that, but I know there are channels to contact with our state education department. They've had many forums to get input from families before developing their guidance, and we could see if that type of forum and feedback is going to continue.
So I'll chime in with one of the things that we can do is those types of concerns can come to my office. And we can go through our Community and Government Relations Committee that is one of our board committees. And then we can make sure that that information is passed up to the State Department, to our legislators, et cetera, so that we are then impacting the decisions that are made at that level.
Thank you. Okay, I think I did that one. So this is a question that has come up frequently, and I think we addressed it in our frequently asked questions, but I think it's worth restating. What happens when a positive case shows up, classes shut down, school shut down? I think it's really important, and Mrs. Adams can add to this, really important that families, students, staff know that there are very clear procedures that have to occur in the event of a positive case. And that is not a decision for our level, it's a decision for the Department of Health. And so in our response, we talked about our direct report to our medical director, who then has the direct report to the Department of Health. And we follow the directives given by the Director of Health as to whether it's a class shutdown, a school shutdown, what the cleaning procedures need to be. Whatever steps we need to take is guided explicitly by the Department of Health. What are the student supervision pairings? Are these certified teachers? I think this bears repeating again. Our first effort at the elementary level is to pair our core teachers. That's our certified, elementary teachers. Our encore teachers, art, music, PE, library, our E&L teachers, our reading teachers as our first pairing opportunity. But we also know that we will have to bring in our certified teaching assistants who are certified to support instruction that is planned by the teacher. And we may have to bring in some other certified staff to do that work who don't traditionally teach. We are pretty close to being able to staff with just our certified people. But as we have noted throughout this presentation, nothing is final. And so we're making every effort to get to that because we want it to be the strongest possible instructional model to support our students, particularly after being in the extended closure from March until June. And so that's a Herculean effort that the principals are attempting at this moment in time to partner up, that we will continue to revisit. And as I indicated, if necessary and if available, pulling down staff that are certified K-12 to support that as well. This is a hard question, but I think it's important to read into our presentation. Some family members who fall in high-risk groups for severe illness or death from the virus. Has any thought been given to educational equality, equity issues surrounding families' needs for remote virtual learning to prevent infection? Remote learning that is parent, guardian, facilitated is not equivalent to learning at school with the teacher. How will the district ensure that all children get the same educational stimulation with parent choice playing a role in the classroom versus virtual instruction? What resources or tools will be available to parents and children learning remotely, particularly children whose parents are also working full-time from home simultaneously? So a lot of thought given to this, and this is what we faced throughout our March through June closure. I think the first words out of my principal's mouth was, around this issue of equity and what families need and what types of support student will need in a virtual setting. And that's why we are committed, Mrs. Adams is committed to developing a process where there is family choice so that we can select the best model that will work for families. And we are designing a virtual model that is more robust than what we have presented in the fall. Something that we're allowed to be, that enables us to be more engaging. I'm very excited. If you haven't signed up yet, we have virtual academic summer school for elementary school, which will be our practice run with live instruction for our students grades 1st through 6th. So go to the City School District of Albany website and fill out an application. We still have spots available. But it'll allow us to see what else is needed when we're providing that live instruction and what types of things we can give students when they are working independently and not in front of a computer, because we also want to be developmentally appropriate with the amount of time that we have children sitting in front of a computer, and also being really thoughtful about what they can do when they are not in front of a computer with a working parent. We have a lot of working parents among all of our staff, and so that's been a prevalent part of the conversation as well. Another really important question, how will social emotional support be offered to teachers who are doing more with less and addressing student learning lag from distance education in the spring? And this has been a topic of discussion for us as well. We recognize that everyone has been through this experience and that it has impacted each and every one of us differently. And so we will be very intentional in our reopening efforts in our opening days to provide some social emotional frameworks and supports for our teachers and ways for them to maintain their own mental health as they support our students through this process. And so it is very important, just as important as the work that we will do with the social emotional learning around the needs of our students. What training will be provided to non-classroom teachers so that they can perform new roles? Great question, and one that we've talked about recently. In our opening days, we have PD days set aside, and PD professional development will be provided to all staff, hall monitors, teaching assistants, all of our teachers about what the new work looks like, and if they will be in a supervisory role, what that supervisory role looks like, providing support in navigating Google Classroom, setting up the computer for students, will all be taken into consideration so that our staff is as prepared as possible to support the structure of learning that we have developed. How will we be notified if a child or teacher has been exposed or positive? Example, substitute teacher potentially going to numerous schools. So I'm actually going to answer the latter part of that first because that's important. We are limiting the traveling of staff as much as humanly possible. That allows the buildings to stay staffed. So we have staff on a regular basis, not just substitute teachers, our coaches, some of our social workers, some of our encore staff that travel from building to building multiple times a day, throughout the week. That is being limited through our scheduling process. for the exact reason that we don't want, that possibility of contact going in multiple places. So that will be severely limited. However, our notification process follows what the guidance that we are given by the Department of Health. And we have had notification that we have done prior to closure, just an abundance of caution to let families know when something has potentially even popped on the radar, so that we keep them informed. Ms. Adams, anything you would add to that? Will the district be making an agreement for free internet access through Spectrum for all families, not just new customers, who opt for hybrid or online learning? With the end of extra unemployment, families will struggle to pay for necessary access to instruction. What I can say is I know the district committed to purchasing hotspots for our families who are in need, and we use the survey process to work with families to identify that. And so we would assess our capacity to continue to provide that level of support for families who identify that need. I
will add on to that, that there are various carriers that, due to the nature of the online learning, they have, increased the bandwidth for certain programs that you may have, or hotspot availability with cell phone companies. But we will be outreaching to various carriers to see what programs they may have, because we do know that there are programs that different carriers are putting in place for students and for families to facilitate having that internet access. So we will be working through to see what those options are, and we would be able to provide those options for our families. Whether we enter into a formal agreement or not, that is yet to be determined, but we are absolutely researching what is it that we can make available or make our families aware of in terms of how to ensure that we have internet capabilities.
This is a different question. How will homebound students' social emotional needs be met? So I'm assuming that it means our students who are in those virtual learning spaces. Our student support team did some amazing work over the COVID school closure. Actually, not just because Ms. Callahan's on the call, but I'm going to shout out Ash. They really intentionally engaged their social worker, behavior specialists, school psychologists to connect with children in the Google Classroom space, which resulted in a higher participation level of students in that virtual learning space. And so they are one of our most crucial members to this work to ensure that our students are supported throughout this very new, very different and difficult process. And so we would absolutely incorporate our virtual students in our social emotional supports. And we will balance that with the needs that we have for our students that are on site. Answer that. Answer that. Will children be able to have any freedom or movement during the day, or will they be forced to sit for the majority of the day in order to keep them 6 feet apart in the classroom? How will their developmental needs for socialization and movement breaks be met while social distancing rules are in place? This is heavy on the hearts of many of us who are little people experts, as I like to call it. We know how much they need to move, get around, and being confined to one space will be very, very challenging. Ashley Chappell, our new director of physical education and athletics, was very vocal on our team about the importance of the physical movement of our students. And has kept that at the forefront for us. And so outdoor spaces are going to be essential for as long as the weather follows the guidelines that we're allowed to take children outside. That will probably happen more frequently than we ever have before in order for those children to get the appropriate movement breaks. We're thinking through how we use our hallway spaces to try to provide children with quiet breaks. However, we have to think through what the sanitization and cleaning process is between, that movement through the hallway. But we are looking for every opportunity to be developmentally appropriate in these new constraints. Will mask wearing be added to the code of conduct? How many administrators handle students how will administrators handle students who refuse to wear masks? That question has come up quite a bit. Our student focus group expressed their, disappointment with having to wear a mask all day. We will follow the code of conduct like we do in everything, and I don't think putting the masks in there separately is our intent. It's going to be handled in the way that we handle students when there are non-compliance issues with any of our structures or policy that we have put in place. And our first step is always to teach and support our students to ensure that they understand the importance of why they're wearing a mask. We're not just doing it to be mean. One of our kiddos on our student focus group said, well, first we need to teach the kids what COVID is, and so that they really have an understanding of why this is a safety concern. And for our littlest people, I think that will probably be one of our most important steps. But we will continue to work with our PPS department, our student support team, and our administrators on how to appropriately support students who refuse to wear masks. And we're going to work very closely with their families to make the best decision for them and for the school. Will students receive related services as a priority or only if they aren't supervising a classroom? So by related services, we initially had our speech therapists included in our core rotation process, but then realizing the weight of their IEP requirements that they have to deliver, it's a group that we've taken out so that we can have intentional time for them to work with their students. We're still working out the details of how those individual sessions look like and what equipment they need to deliver that successfully. And the same applies to our resource room teachers and our other related service providers, identifying spaces where we can safely pull students and sanitize those spaces for students to receive their related services. But with our special education population being a priority to be on site each day, K to 12, it is something that we will continue to work through. And I have 2 minutes, so I'm going to try to get to one more question before I close this out. And I can't thank you enough for all of the questions because it'll be helpful for us as we go back and refrain our plan. Mental health, we've gotten a lot of these. Parent choice.
Dr. Wilson-Turner?
Yes, ma'am.
If I may, there's the question that looks at differentiated instruction. Okay. And how we will address the needs of students that may have fallen further behind. And I can just kind of close out and start that. And if you want to conclude with that, that's fine. But one of the things that we have done as a district is we have looked at that delivery of quality instruction over the past few months and what that looks like in a virtual environment. And our instructional supervisors and teachers, we have a group of teachers that have been working with our instructional supervisors to look at the curriculum and instructional component of how do we ensure that we are able to differentiate instruction. So to provide an exact answer tonight, that's not going to be possible, but to know that we are working on what does that look like in terms of how do we deliver hands-on instruction virtually? How do we look at heightening that engagement and level of rigor and accountability within our instructional program? It is absolutely being looked at through our curriculum and instruction division with the help of our instructional supervisors, our coaches, and our teachers. So that is something that is absolutely a priority. And to kind of wrap that up with looking at students that may have fallen further behind, how do we scaffold that instruction at the beginning of the year so that we not only move our students forward, but we look at how do we embed some of the items and standards that they should have learned or should have mastered, that there still may be gaps. How do we close those gaps while still moving our students forward academically is absolutely something that we're looking at. So thank you very much for that question. We do appreciate that because at the core of it, we are looking at how are we going to be able to ramp up the rigor of instruction, the accountability, and look at that differentiated model of how do we engage our students at higher levels while still closing those gaps of learning. So thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Adams. And thank you again to Mrs. Hunt, Mrs. Cullihan, and Ms. Bridgewater for their participation this evening and supporting the elementary reopening process. Thank you to all of you who tuned in and all the questions and feedback that you have provided for our consideration. We will take these questions and continue to enhance our frequently asked question document so that we are able to keep our public as informed as possible. And that concludes our reopening forum for elementary education. We will be providing continuous updates at each board meeting on our progress so that we can continue to get feedback and input before realizing our final plan and implementation. Thank you, everyone.